Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Sonia.
Carrie, what was your best bite of the week?
Well, Sonia, I made a couple of soups from a couple of our recent episodes. In our personal chef episode, I went back to this recipe that I made for clients 10 years ago, chicken cheddar chowder, and it was such a hit with my family. What I love about it is it starts with just a couple slices of bacon. You crisp them up in a pan, and then you pull them out, and then you use that bacon grease to cook some onions and some red bell pepper and a little bit of garlic, just a little bit of aromatics to get it going. Then you add white meat chicken that you pull off of a rotisserie chicken. So you don't even have to cook that. You can just add that in and you add some broth. I always use homemade, but you can also use store-bought. Then while that cooks a little bit, then you make a slurry with a little bit of milk. You add some flour to it and you whisk it up. And then you pour it in and you let it bubble and thicken a little bit and you add some potatoes and corn. And so it ends up being this really creamy, slightly thick chowder with potatoes and corn and chicken. At the end, you add a little bit of cheddar cheese and then you garnish it with, I garnished it with some scallions and this crispy bacon. It makes a really big batch. We ate it for a few days. It was like a really easy thing to reheat and we served it with some potato chips once we had used up all the bacon and it was really delicious.
Oh, you mean you crumbled potato chips on top instead of bacon?
Yeah, we crumbled potato chips on top.
Well, when you first mentioned this to me, it was really interesting to hear about creating a slurry with flour as opposed to a bechamel or a cornstarch slurry. Those are the slurries I know. I like that there's this kind of different technique for thickening a soup. And also you're thickening it without adding too much heavy cream or fat. So it is a creamy soup, but it sounds lighter than a typical chowder.
Yeah, it came from Cooking Light magazine. It was a magazine that I used to subscribe to when I was younger because I grew up in that sort of low-fat, fat-free craze. My mom would always use low-fat cream cheese or skim milk or all those things. I don't subscribe to those ideas anymore, but there's something about a soup that is not so heavy and not so it's creamy without being too heavy. That's something I love about that Avgo Lemino soup too, is that it's rich and delicious without weighing you down.
Yeah, it sounds very nostalgic, classic American comfort food that I think a lot of people would enjoy.
My family was like, oh, you've never made this before. You could definitely make this again. Everyone voted for me to make it again. Another recipe that I made this week that I've talked about before is a meatball soup recipe. And it was something I had intended to make. It's a recipe that takes a lot of time. They really want you to make homemade meatballs and then you build all of this flavor with the broth, and it has chicken broth and it has beef broth, and you put a scoop of ricotta on top. It was really, really delicious. But the recipe called for ground beef and pork in the meatballs. And so I bought a pound of ground beef, like a package of ground beef, but then I got a couple of links of sausage and I had extra ground beef left over. And so I ended up making more meatballs just kind of on the side.
Didn't call for a whole pound of ground beef?
Because it didn't call for a whole pound. And so then I ran back to the store because I was like, oh, I have this ground beef left over and I don't want to waste it and I don't want to refreeze it. And so then I went to the store and I was like, wow, those meatballs were really good. It called for a panade too, which is something I haven't done for a long time, which is basically just taking a little bit of cream and soaking some breadcrumbs in it. So it kind of works like a glue to keep your meatballs together, but it keeps them really light and tender. They were delicious in the soup, so delicious that I wanted to make them again. And I made them and I stuck them in the fridge for like a rainy day. And then that rainy day came. We came home one night and I was like, we have meatballs in the fridge. Do you guys want spaghetti and meatballs? But I didn't have any marinara, so I just opened up a jar of Rayo's. I reheated the meatballs in the Rayo's. I added some cooked pasta, and I also had a bunch of kale, and I just threw that in. So it ended up being this one pot spaghetti, pasta, meatballs, kale dinner that my whole family was like, how did you even do that in 30 minutes? The gift was that I had made those meatballs a few days in advance.
Well, I love the idea of taking a sub recipe and making it a head recipe or a prominent recipe. You're saying this is a different way to make meatballs, and I loved it so much that I don't need to put it in the soup. I can have it as a traditional meatball. It's funny because our fan and friend, local to Portland, Roy Lambert, actually wrote us about a panade recently and how much he's loving that as a technique for meatballs. Traditionally, in a meatball mixture, you'll just add dry breadcrumbs and egg as a binder, but a panade can add so much moisture to meatball and make it really a different texture, which is, again, just so like helpful to be reminded of.
His suggestion on our email was like, I'm going to make the meatball soup. And that one has the panade in it. And then I'll just make meatballs again. And so just people putting those ideas in your head really help your cooking along. You can be inspired by people's suggestions.
I also revisited some recipes this week. I'm going to tell you about a couple we've talked about and one I don't know if we've talked about before. So this week I made glow soup, the viral TikTok glow soup, which you made so often last year, but I think I've only ever made it once. And, it's just like one of those pretty easy soups, especially if you have stock on hand, even store-bought stock. It's carrot, leek, and bell pepper is really the base of the soup, and a few spices. And then the recipe calls for a store-bought vegetable stock and then a can of coconut milk at the end. So it's a very simple soup in a way. You blend it all together. You can use an immersion blender or a blender or a food processor. And I just love the vibrancy of it. And I made it for my...
It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
Yes. And it's really tasty. It's one of those dishes that the sum of it is greater than the parts.
Yes.
I kept thinking, I don't understand where all the flavor comes from, but it's very heavy on leeks and on carrots. And so there's this sweetness and the creaminess once you blend up all those leeks. It's really delicious.
It really is. The other recipe I made that we've talked about a lot before, but it was the first time I've made this year, was I made apple butter, pure apple butter, where you add nothing but apples. You can do this in your slow cooker, which I plan to do again. And I love the slow cooker method because it's so hands off. But I actually wanted to see what it tasted like making it in the oven. So this batch I made in the oven, which is you take a bunch of apples. I put nothing else except for a cinnamon stick, actually. I put apples, a little bit of water, and a cinnamon stick. You don't have to peel your apples.
I was going to say, you didn't peel your apples, right?
You don't want to peel your apples because you want the color to be vibrant. And so actually the redder the apple, the prettier the apple butter. And then also I took all the cores that I had and I'm making apple cider vinegar with them because I was I had so many cores, I might as well use them. So what you're doing in the oven is you're cooking it at a low temperature and every 30 minutes you have to stir it, which is kind of annoying if you don't. That's why the slow cooker method is so much easier. Right. But I didn't mind because it was a day when I was just putzing around. So it was kind of nice for me to do it. And I have to say, I don't think it's a significant difference between your slow cooker and your oven, which is what I wanted to know. I probably will be making it in the slow cooker from here on out.
Sonia, what have you used your apple butter for? Because I found that when we make it at our house, we end up just kind of eating it by the spoonful.
I've been topping my yogurt and breakfast. Yeah, I really have been liking it on yogurt for breakfast. And actually cooked apples are apparently really good for you. And so I just love it. And it's so appley. And then I also love it on toast, buttery sourdough toast. I gave a couple jars away as well because I think it makes such a nice gift to give someone.
Yeah, I wish I could have been the receiver of one of those jars.
I happily would have given you one. Okay, but the real best bite, I want to tell you all about that because each of those things really were a delight this week. And I've had a big cooking week, as you can tell. I also was recently given this bar of chocolate that really inspired me. So I got this bar of chocolate. The brand is called Beyond Good. I really like their chocolate. I like their packaging. They're doing really interesting things in the chocolate space. This flavor was a date sesame chocolate bar. And I've never had a date sesame chocolate bar. And I was like, oh, this could be a really good combination for my tahini chocolate chip cookie base.
Oh, wow.
Which is a recipe I share. I don't share my main chocolate chip cookies, but I share my tahini cookie recipe. And it's pretty
Which I can
close.
Attest to. It's so delicious.
And it's really versatile. So sometimes I use rye flour in it, but you can make it just with all-purpose flour. So I took that base recipe and I added chopped up dates. I added the chopped up chocolate from this chocolate bar. And then I added a bunch of sesame seeds on top, which I normally don't add to my tahini cookies, even though tahini is made of sesame. And these were my favorite batch of tahini cookies yet. the combination of that molassesy date and that rich chocolate with the nuttiness, just, and it
Of the
wasn't too,
tahini.
and it wasn't too sweet. If it sounds too sweet, it was not too sweet. It really worked.
Wow. And did you make those for clients or did you make those for your own personal stash?
I made those to take to someone's house for dinner as a
Oh,
gift.
wow.
I froze some of the,
Lucky them.
they really enjoyed them. It was
Oh my
very
gosh, they must have
successful.
lost their minds. I remember when we worked that retreat and you made your tahini cookies and you put all the dried fruit from the farmer's market, like the dried apricots, the dried plums. And it was like these beautiful cookies with little pieces of jewels. That richness of the cookie with the chewiness of the fruit is so lovely.
Yeah, and I really like also the Soom tahini for the tahini. I think it works really well in baking. It's a very creamy consistency. Some tahinis can be chalky. I like the Soom brand. There's other ones out there that are good, but I do think these little things help the cookie get even better. But this is the kind of cookie that's very crisp edged, very soft in the middle, really pools of chocolate because you're using chopped chocolate. You're not using chocolate chips. So it really like melts and oozes.
Little details, though, make a difference. We say this, I think every home cook knows this to be true. With good ingredients, if you have really great butter, if you have really great tahini, if you have really high quality chocolate, those things make a difference in your cookie being like, oh, it's a great cookie versus this is a memorable cookie and it was the best thing I ate all week.
It really was. And so I brought the cookies to the dinner and I also got a pint of really good ice cream. And I
Oh
think
my gosh, stop
well,
it.
this was a dinner party.
Right.
I'm sure the cookies would have been enough, but cookies and ice cream is
Oh
really a
my.
dessert. And I said
Did
I
you
was
make a sandwich?
no, I mean that would have
Okay.
been smart. No, I just
Oh.
but the if you take the cookie and you have a vanilla based ice cream, we got a McConnell's
Oh
some version of
gosh.
McConnell's
So
ice
rich.
cream. Yeah, yeah. Creamy vanilla
How
base with flecks of
wonderful.
chocolate and then the tahini. It's really yummy.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Does it have to do with your best bite? But what did they make for dinner, for the dinner party that you went to?
She made a really interesting recipe that came, I think, from the New York Times, and it was this spinach orzo dish where it was all this like spinachy orzo with I think feta, and it was kind of almost risotto like. And then her partner also made these chicken meatballs with tons of herbs. She's vegetarian and he eats meat, so he likes to have a little meat on the table. I actually just had the orzo, and then there was a simple salad, and then this dessert. So actually, it was kind of not too rich of a meal, and it all sort of worked perfectly together.
I mean, it sounds like a perfect meal to me. Something healthy and delicious for dinner, and then this rich dessert.
Yeah, it works.
How wonderful. Well, this has been fun, Sonia.
Yeah, until next time.
Until next time, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.